Namaskar students. Hope you are hale and hearty, taking care of your health and your studies. My name is Jyotsna and I am from Education Department, Chandigarh. History. History is a mystery. And in order to decode this mystery, we rely on many sources. Till now, we have studied the what, when and where of the history and the mankind. Then we talked about various kingdoms. We talked about the various trades, the occupations people carried out at different points in time. We talked about the greatest king of India, the king who changed the definition of war, none other than Ashoka. Ashoka and his change of heart after the worst war he had been in. His faith in Buddhism. Then we talked about various ideologies at different points in time. The world kept going. People kept exchanging their thought processes, their goods and services. And with this, we had a very strong and diverse culture. With this, we are going to begin today's session because today's session revolves around these people only who made difference to the society, who made difference to the culture. These were the Traders, Kings and Pilgrims. Yes, this is the name of the chapter we are going to take up today of grade 6 book, Our Past, part 1. This is chapter number 9. So without wasting any time, let's get going. You have read in the previous chapter that fine pottery were found from several archaeological sites throughout the subcontinent. These potteries were carried by traders from the places they were made to sell them at other places. South India was famous for gold, pepper, and precious stones. In the Roman Empire, pepper was valued so much that it was known as black gold. So traders carried many of these goods to Rome in ships across the sea and by land in caravans. Several sea routes were explored by traders and some of these followed the coasts. There were others across the Arabian Sea and the Bay of Bengal, where sailors took advantage of the monsoon winds to cross the seas more quickly. Let's talk about new kingdoms along the coasts. The southern half of the subcontinent was marked by a long coastline and with hills, plateaus, and river valleys. Kaveri was the most fertile amongst the river valleys. Chiefs and kings became rich and powerful who controlled the river valleys and the coasts. Sangam poems mention the Muvendar, a Tamil word meaning three chiefs, used for the heads of three ruling families, the Cholas, Cheras and Pandyas, who became powerful in South India around 2300 years ago. Each of the three chiefs had two centers of power, one inland and one of the coast. Among the 6 cities, 2 were important: Puhar or Kaveripatnam, the port of Cholas, and Madurai, the capital of Pandyas. Instead of regular taxes, the chiefs demanded and received gifts from the people. They used to go on military expeditions to collect tribute from neighboring areas. Some of the wealth they kept for themselves and the rest they distributed amongst their supporters, including members of their family, soldiers, and poets. Many poets' compositions were found in the Sangam collection, who were awarded precious stones, gold, horses, elephants, chariots, and fine clothes. Around 200 years later, a dynasty known as the Satavahanas became powerful in Western India. The most important ruler of Satavahanas was Gautamiputra, Sri Satkarni. He and other Satavahana rulers were known as the Lord of the Dakshina Patha, literally the route leading to the south, which was also used as a name for the entire southern region. So let's discuss the story of the Silk Route now. The process of making silk was very complicated. Raw silk has to be extracted from the cocoons of silkworms, spun into thread, and then woven into cloth. China invented the technique of making silk. The method used by China was kept as a secret for thousands of years. People from China who went to distant lands on foot, horseback, and on camels carried silk with them. The path they followed came to be known as the Silk Route. Chinese rulers sometimes sent gifts of silk to rulers in Iran and West Asia, due to which the knowledge of silk spread further west. Amongst the rulers and the rich people in Rome, wearing silk became the fashion about 2000 years ago. At that period, silk was very expensive as it had to be brought all the way from China via roads through mountains and deserts. Some kings tried to control large portions of the route because they could benefit from taxes, tributes, and gifts that were brought by traders traveling along the route. In return, they protected the traders who passed through their kingdoms from attacks by robbers. The Silk Route was controlled by the Kushanas, who ruled over Central Asia and Northwest India around 2000 years ago. Their two major centers of power were Peshawar and Mathura. Takshila was also included in their kingdom. During their rule, a branch of the Silk Route extended from Central Asia down to the seaports at the mouth of the river Indus, from where silk was shipped westwards to the Roman Empire. Let's have a quick recap of what we just did. On your screens, you have a question or a statement. Along with that, you have 4 options. All you need to do is to pick the correct option. So, for what was the South India famous for? Gold, spices, stones, or all of these? Yes, the correct option is option D, all of these. South India was famous for gold, spices, and stones. Moving on, where did the Romans find gold? South India, East India, West India, or North India? So the Romans found gold in South India. Very good. Which river valley is the most fertile? Kaveri River Valley, Yamuna River Valley, Brahmaputra River Valley, or none of these? Kaveri River Valley is the most fertile river valley. Who controlled the river valleys? chiefs and kings, poor men, ordinary people, or none of these? Yes, chiefs and kings controlled the river valleys. Okay, so what does Muvender mean? Three chiefs, three kings, three groups of people, or none of these? So Muvender meant option A, three chiefs. Very good. When did Cholas, Cheras and Pandyas become powerful in South India? About 1300 years ago? About 2300 years ago? About 3300 years ago? Or about 4300 years ago? So Cholas, Cheras and Pandyas became powerful in South India around 2300 years ago. So the correct option is option B. Okay, now let's talk about Buddhism. Let's take up the spread of Buddhism. So Kanishk was the most famous Kushan ruler who ruled around 1900 years ago. He organized a Buddhist council where scholars met and discussed important matters. So there was a poet, a very famous poet called Ashwaghosha, who composed a biography of the Buddha. The name of that biography was the Buddha Charitra. And this poet lived in the court of Kanishka. Mahayana Buddhism, a new form of Buddhism, developed which had two distinct features. Earlier, the Buddha's presence was shown in the sculpture by using certain signs. For instance, his attainment of enlightenment was shown by sculpture of the peepal tree. Later, statues of the Buddha were made in the Mathura and in Takshila. Bodhisattva were supposed to be the persons who had attained enlightenment, and after attaining enlightenment, they could live in complete isolation and meditate in peace. But they remain in the world to teach and help other people. In India, Buddhism was spread to the western and eastern regions, where dozens of caves were hollowed out of the hills for monks to live in. Some of these caves were made on the orders of kings and queens, other by merchants and farmers, located near passes through the Western Ghats. Buddhism also spread southeastward to Sri Lanka, Myanmar, Thailand, and other parts of Southeast Asia, including Indonesia. The older form of Buddhism, known as Theravada Buddhism, was more popular in these areas. Let's talk about the quest of the pilgrims. So now we talk about this Chinese Buddhist pilgrim Fo Yuan, who came to the subcontinent about 1600 years ago. Yuan Zhang and Ai Qing came about 50 years after Yuan Zhang. They came to visit places associated with the life of Buddha as well as famous monasteries. Each of these pilgrims wrote of the dangers they encountered on their travels, which took years, of the countries and the monasteries that they visited, and the book they carried back with them. Yuan Zhang took the land route back to China. He carried back statues of the Buddha made of gold, silver, and sandalwood, and over 600 manuscripts loaded on the back of 20 horses. Over 50 manuscripts were lost when the boat on which he was crossing the Indus capsized. He spent the rest of his life translating the remaining manuscripts from Sanskrit into Chinese. Now there was this beginning of bhakti. During this time, the worship of certain deities Shiva, Vishnu, and goddess such as Durga gained importance in Hinduism. These deities were worshipped through bhakti, an idea that became very popular. Bhakti means a person's devotion to his or her chosen deity. In the sacred books of Hindus, the Bhagavad Gita, the idea of bhakti is present, which is included in Mahabharata. In this, Krishna, the god, asked Arjuna, his devotee and friend, to abandon all dharmas and take refuge in him, as only he can set Arjuna free from every evil. This form of worship widely spread to different parts of the country. Those who followed the system of bhakti emphasized devotion and individual worship of a god or goddess rather than the performance of elaborate sacrifices. According to this system of belief, if a devotee worships the chosen deity with a pure heart, the deity will appear in the form in which he or she may desire. It could be thought of as a human being, lion, tree, or any other form. Let's have a quick look at the focal points we have covered today. First and foremost, we talked about traders and the black gold, wherein we talked about South India being known for its gold, spices, especially pepper and precious stones. South Indian pepper was very popular in the Roman Empire and it was also known as a black gold. Then we talked about exploring sea routes. In the course of their trading activities, traders explored many sea routes. Other traders reached the western coast of the subcontinent from East Africa or Arabia, sailing during the southwest monsoon. We talked about Movendar, which literally means three chiefs. The Sangam literature talks about Movendar meaning three chiefs, the Chola, Chera and the Pandyas. They were powerful around 2300 years ago. We talked about the emergence of Satavahanas. The Satavahana dynasty emerged after 200 years and was powerful in Western India. An important ruler of dynasty was Gautami Putra Sri Satakarni. Then we talked about the Silk Route. The techniques of making silk were first invented in China around 7000 years ago. The Chinese went to the distant land carrying silk with them. The path they followed came to be known as the Silk Route. Then we talked about the control on this Silk Route. Some of the rulers of the earlier times tried to control the Silk Route for collecting taxes, tributes and gifts brought by the traders. The Indian rulers who controlled the Silk Route were the Kushanas. We talked about Buddhist council. The Kushana ruler Kanishka, who ruled around 1900 years ago, organized a Buddhist council. Ashwagosha, a poet, composed a biography of Buddha known as Buddha Charita. We talked about spread of Buddhism. A new form of Buddhism, Mahayana Buddhism, developed and spread throughout western and southern India and southwards to Sri Lanka, Myanmar, Thailand and Indonesia. Then we talked about Buddhist pilgrim. Traders journeyed to distant lands in caravans and ships. With them, pilgrims often traveled. Well known was the Chinese Buddhist pilgrim Fa Zhang, Yung Zhang and Ai Qing. They left accounts of their journeys. And we ended it up with the beginning of Bhakti. The word Bhakti in Sanskrit, which means bhaj, means to divide or share. It suggests an intimate two-way relationship between the deity and the devotee. Bhakti is directed towards Bhagavad. Let's try to analyze what we have extracted out of today's session. Alright, so on your screens you will find some questions and along with that you have 4 options. So you have to pick the correct option. So let's get going. So who was the most powerful ruler of Satavahanas? Gautami Putra Sri Satakarni, Krishna, Siddhartha or all of these? So the most powerful ruler of Satavahanas was Gautami Putra Sri Satakarni. Moving on, who were known as Lord of Dakshina Path? Chandragupta, Raja Ram Mohan Roy, Gautami Putra Sri Satakarni or none of these? So, the lord of Dakshinapath was Gautami Putra Sri Satkarni. Alright, to whom did the Chinese rulers send gifts of silk? Rulers of Iran, rulers of Iraq, rulers of Pakistan, rulers of Kazakhstan. So the Chinese rulers sent gifts to the rulers of Iran. Alright, which tree was shown in the sculptures of Buddhism? Neem, Tulsi, Peepal or Mango? So it was Peepal, option C. Where were the statues of Buddha made? Mathura and Takshila, Mumbai and Goa, Bihar and UP, Delhi and Haryana. So the statues of Buddha were made in Mathura and Takshila. Men and women who undertook journey to the holy places in order to offer worship are called traders, pilgrims, Buddhism or Theravada. So men and women who undertook journey to the holy places in order to offer worship were called pilgrims. In what work did Yuan Zhang spend his life? In translating manuscripts from Sanskrit to Chinese, moving here and there, sleeping, or all of these. So Yuan Zhang, who was a pilgrim, actually spent a whole lot of his life in translating manuscripts from Sanskrit to Chinese. From where did the term India derive? River Indus, River Ganga, River Yamuna or River Mahanadi? It is option A, River Indus. On your screens you can find certain set of words in two different columns. You have to match the columns. So Muvendar were the Cholas, Cheras and Pandyas. Lord of Dakshinapath, Satavahan's rulers. Ashwaghosha, Buddha Charita. Bodhisattvas, these were the Mahayana Buddhism. Yuan Zhang was a Chinese pilgrim. A generation that ignores history has no past and no future. This is a famous quote and so true. The questions of the present are often answered in our past. I hope today's session must have answered many queries of yours. With this, I sign off today. We'll be back with many more videos. Till then, stay safe, stay healthy and keep learning. Namaskar.